Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into the secrets of a truly unique form of Japanese architecture. It's a story about how taxes, believe it or not, along with earthquakes and social rules, led to some of the most clever homes you'll ever see.
All right, let's just jump right in with a puzzle. If you've ever walked down one of those historic alleys in Kyoto, you've seen them, right? These gorgeous townhouses, but they're super long and skinny. They just stretch way, way back from the street. Now, that's not some random design choice. Oh no, it's an absolutely brilliant solution to a very particular problem.
So, where do we find the first clue to this mystery? Well, it's not in some fancy architecture textbook. Nope, it's buried in an old tax code. And this, right here, is where the story gets really interesting.
Okay, so get this. Back in the Edo period, property taxes were calculated based on how much of your building was facing the street. Simple as that. The wider your house, the more you paid. For merchants, this was a huge deal, a direct hit to their profits. So what did they do? They got smart. They built narrow, really narrow, but super deep. This way, they could pack in all the living and business space they needed without getting crushed by taxes.
And this clever little tax dodge gave birth to a whole new style of building. It even got a nickname, Unagi no Nedoko, which means the eel's bed. Isn't that perfect? You can just picture it, can't you? This long, skinny, efficient shape, just like an eel. It's the perfect name for a design born out of financial necessity.
Now, what's so cool about this eel's bed layout is how it flawlessly separated public life from private life all under one roof. Think about it. You'd walk in off the street right into the shop, the Mise. Then you'd go a little deeper into this long packed earth hallway, the Tsuboniwa. That was kind of a semi-public zone, for deliveries and stuff. And only after all that would you finally get to the family's private space, the kitchen, the living areas. It's like a journey from the public world to the private, all in a single straight line.
Okay, but a super deep house creates a new, pretty obvious problem, right? How in the world do you get light and air into the middle of a building that might be, say, 80 feet deep? The middle would be a cave. The solution, though, was just as elegant as the house itself. They just punched holes in it, tiny open-air courtyards. And we're not talking about backyards here. These were more like light wells or air shafts built right into the guts of the home.
And those little courtyards, they did way more than just let in light. They were a key part of an amazing, built-in, self-cooling system, which you definitely need for Kyoto's incredibly hot and humid summers. Seriously, this is where the Machiya design goes from just being clever to being pure genius.
Yeah, forget about your modern air conditioning. These homes were designed to work with nature, not fight against it. The whole building was basically thought of as a living, breathing thing, a system that could handle its own temperature and humidity, no thermostat needed.
And this is such a great way to think about it. The walls themselves, made from a mix of mud, bamboo, and straw, literally acted like a giant kitchen sponge. In the summer, when the air is thick and humid, the walls just soak up all that extra moisture. Then, come winter, when the air gets super dry, they slowly release it back out. It's like a built-in, all-natural humidifier for the whole house. How cool is that?
So remember those little courtyards? They weren't just passive light sources, they were active cooling engines. Here's what people would do. In the evening, they'd perform this ritual called uchimitsu, which is basically just sprinkling water over the stones and plants in the courtyard. As that water evaporates, it pulls heat out of the air, right? This creates a pocket of cooler, denser air that then gets sucked through the whole house. It's a natural, self-generating breeze.
And we're not talking about a tiny, barely noticeable change here. This super simple, totally electricity-free trick could actually drop the inside temperature by 5 or even 6 degrees Fahrenheit. Let me tell you, on a sticky, sweltering summer night in Kyoto, that is a huge, huge difference. That's the difference between being miserable and being comfortable.
Okay, so this brings up a big question. Maybe a paradox even. We know these were crowded cities, right? And they were really prone to huge fires and, of course, earthquakes. So why on earth would you build your house, your whole city really, out of wood and paper? It seems crazy. Well, the answer is kind of counterintuitive, but it turns out wood was actually the safer and more practical option. Think about it. In an earthquake, a big, heavy stone wall is just going to crack and crumble, but a traditional Japanese wooden frame, with its incredible joinery, is designed to flex and move with the shaking, absorbing the shock. And hey, let's be practical. Wood was cheap and available, and if a fire did sweep through, it was much, much easier to rebuild a wooden house than a stone one. It was all about resilience. And this obsession with elegant problem-solving went all the way to the front of the house. You've seen those beautiful wooden lattices on the facade, right? The Koshi? Well, they weren't just for decoration. They solved a really specific social problem. They let the shopkeeper inside see out perfectly to keep an eye out for customers, but they made it really hard for people on the street to see in. So you get privacy, but you can still run your business. It's this perfect balance of commerce and cultural politeness.
So, you'd think with all this genius design, these buildings would be treasured forever, right? Wrong. In fact, Machiya almost vanished entirely. For decades, they were just seen as old, inconvenient, relics of the past that needed to be replaced.
The number is just staggering. Take a look. 40%. 40% of Kyoto's Machiya were demolished between 1965 and 1995. We're talking about nearly 20,000 of these incredible homes just gone. They were seen as dark, drafty, fire traps. An entire architectural legacy was literally on the verge of being wiped out.
So what saved them? Well, the comeback story is pretty interesting. It wasn't some big government program, at least not at first. It was actually business owners. In the 90s and 2000s, some clever entrepreneurs realized that the unique vibe of a Machiya was something people would pay for. So they started renovating them, turning them into these amazing restaurants, cafes, and shops that people, both tourists and locals, absolutely fell in love with. They proved these old buildings had a real place and real value in the modern world.
And that brings us to today. And wow, have things changed. A beautifully restored Machiya can now rent for 20, even 30% more than a modern building right next to it. Just think about that. What everyone saw as a worthless old liability is now a premium, highly sought-after asset.
I love this quote from a tea house owner. It just says it all. His grandfather actually apologized for leaving him this old building instead of cash. And now, that same building is worth 3 times what a modern one would be. It's just the perfect snapshot of this incredible turnaround.
So after all that, what are we supposed to take away from this? The Machiya is so much more than just a cool piece of history. It's packed with powerful, timeless lessons that we can and should be using to build our cities today.
And look, these aren't just some quaint Japanese ideas. They're universal principles for building smarter, more sustainable places to live. I mean, passively cooling your home without cranking the AC, using sliding walls to create flexible spaces that change with your needs, realizing that a small courtyard that brings light and air to the entire house is way more valuable than a big backyard that only 1 or 2 rooms get to enjoy. Come on, these are lessons we desperately need to relearn.
And maybe that's the ultimate lesson from the Machiya. It teaches us that true, lasting beauty in architecture often comes directly from function. When you design something to solve the real problems of its time and place with intelligence, grace, and ingenuity, a kind of timeless, effortless beauty just happens.